We continue now at the top of Daf Nunamid Beis and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 50b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a statement of Ameimar that if the husband and wife sell the Nichsei Milug, it's not a good sale, and that seemed to contradict what we inferred from our Mishnah. And the Gemara now is in the middle of saying that Ameimar actually might be following a different Tana. He's following the Tana Rebbe Lazar, and the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a Brisa, which is going to bring the sheet of Rebbe Lazar. The Brisa is talking about a situation where you have a seller who sells an Eved that he owns, but for 30 days, he's going to still get the produce of the Eved. Whatever the Eved produces, he will get. So he essentially, the seller still has the Kinyan Peiros on the Eved, but the buyer has the Kinyan Haguf. He has the ownership of the actual Eved, but he gets none of the Peiros. And so the question in the Brisa is, which one is considered to be the actual owner of the Eved? In terms of the halach of Yomo Yomayim, there's a halach of Yomo Yomayim that if a master kills his Eved, let's say strikes his Eved, and then the Eved lingers for a day or two and only dies a little later, so then we say there's a special exemption by the owner of the Eved. So the question is, which one is considered to be the owner of the Eved? And now we're up to Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Rabbi Yossi says, Shnehem Yeshnan Bidin Yomo Yomayim. They're both in the halach of Yomo Yomayim. They're both considered to be the owner. Zem Ibn Shu Tachtav, this one because the Eved is actually working for him, that's the seller. V'zem Ibn Shu Kaspo, the other one, it's the actual money that belongs to the buyer. The buyer is the owner of the Eved. Umisaf Galei, so what's the explanation of Rabbi Yossi? He's in doubt. Kinyan Peiros Kinyan Haguf Dami. He's not sure. Is the Kinyan Peiros considered like a Kinyan Haguf? Ilav Kinyan Haguf Dami, or is it not Kinyan Haguf? And therefore, since he's not sure, so the whole issue over here is the owner chayiv capital punishment? Is he the owner that he should be pater or not? V'safek nefashos lahakil. The general rule is if you have a suffix when it comes to life and death, we're lenient. We're not going to give this person the death penalty in a situation where we're not really sure. The Rashbam here says Shneim Yeshnanu Petur, and they're both pater. They both have the exemption of Yomo Yomayim. The suffix nefashos because it's a doubt in terms of a capital issue, in terms of death penalty. The Bailim Sheiku Mi Nerag Mehem Lahakil. In such a situation, if we're not sure if this is really the owner and therefore whether or not it should be killed or not, so we have to be lenient to Lahakil. We have to be lenient to Nafkalon Mi V'Shaftu Eida V'Tzilu Eida. We learn that concept out from the pasuk, and so in any case, that's the opinion again of Rabbi Yossi V'Safek Nefashos Lahakil. Rebbe Lazar Omer. Rebbe Lazar says, and this is the Rebbe Lazar that we were mentioning that Ameimar is following Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar says Shneim Einon B'Din Yomo Yomayim. They both do not have the exemption of Yomo Yomayim, meaning neither one is considered to be the owner because you have to have both components. Zelafi She'eno Tachtav. This one because meaning the buyer, the Eved's not actually working for the buyer right now, so he's not the owner. Vizen, when it comes to this one, the seller, Lefi She'eno Kaspo, is not really his money. He's not the actual owner of the guf of the Eved, of the body of the Eved, and so therefore they both do not have the din Yomo Yomayim, and we transfer that idea over to Nichsei Milug. By Nichsei Milug as well, the husband has the rights to the Peiros, the wife is the one who actually owns the land, therefore neither is considered really to be the owner. That's why the sale is no good. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rav, and Rava says, my time at Rebbe Lazar, what's the reason of Rebbe Lazar? Amar Krutz, because the pasuk says, Lo yukam ki kaspahu, it uses the word ki kaspahu, that it belongs to him as his money, kaspo hamiyuchad lo, that means it has to be specifically designated only for him. If you have this kind of sharing of the ownership, that's not true ownership. And the words Lo yukam ki kaspahu, we'll see the full pasuk, it's achim yomo yomayim yamod, Lo yukam ki kaspahu, this is actually the pasuk of Yomo Yomayim, and the Rashbam explains ki kaspahu miyusaru, it's extra these words, you don't need to give a reason at all. Velomar lo yukam lafisha kaspo, it's saying that lo yukam because of the fact ki kaspahu, you don't need to give a reason, therefore it's extra, and so we're learning again it has to be kaspo hamiyuchad lo. The Rashbam offers another explanation, inami mi dematzi lamechtav ki kesefu, it could have said ki kesefu, instead it says ki kaspahu, umishamachi nami yolaf ameimar, for the same exact reason, ameimar is saying the same idea. The Meseches Hashas has a slightly different gear, so umeihacha nami yolaf ameimar, ameimar is learning from here. Legabe nichsei milug, he's learning from here to nichsei milug, the same idea. The kevan deino miyuchad lo leish v'lo leisha, since the nichsei milug is not designated specifically for the husband or the wife, eino karei sadu ha'ish v'lo sadish, it's not called the field of the husband, and it's not called the field of the wife. V'hilgachem machru shneim, therefore if they both sell, mechern batel, the sale is nullified. V'yacholin la'achzor bam, and they can retract the sale. Kadam hamocher davar she'eino shalo, just like anybody who would sell something that's not his, de lo lahavim mecher, that in such a situation, de lo havim mecher, it's not considered to be a sale. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'lo le'ish chazaka b'nichsei ishto." A husband cannot make a chazaka in his wife's property, again by nichsei melug, since the husband is entitled to the peiros of the property. So working the property for 3 years does not produce a chazaka, like we said. But the Gemara asks, "V'amar Rav," but didn't Rav say, "Eishes ish tzricha limchos"? He made a statement that the wife she needs to protest. A married woman needs to protest. Now, what exactly was Rav talking about? B'man, now what is he talking about? Who is this wife expected to protest against? Ilema ba'acher. Now, if you're going to say that it's somebody else, someone else came along, not her husband, someone else came along and started to work her nichsei melug. V'yomar Rav, but Rav said, "Ein machzikin b'nichsei eishes ish." You can't make a chazaka in the property of a married woman because the married woman is not expected to protest because she thinks her husband is going to protest on her behalf. So it can't be that Rav was talking when he said an eishes ish, that a married woman needs to protest. It can't be she's protesting against some stranger, against somebody else. Elalav bebal, rather it must be Rav meant that the married woman needs to protest against her husband if he's making a chazaka in her property. But our Mishnah said the husband can't make a chazaka in her property because again, he's entitled to peiros, as we said. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rava says, Liolam bebal, really Rav was talking about the husband, and there is a case where she does need a protest where he can make a chazaka. The case would be, let's say he's digging up the property, he's digging in pits and cisterns and caves. If he's doing that already, this is a property that's not meant to have boros, shichanum, aros. So there he's not just working the property and getting produce, he's essentially damaging the property. He's using the property in ways that he shouldn't, and that's what Rav meant. In such a situation, she's expected to protest, and if she doesn't protest, we do assume that she sold the property to him. But the Gemara continues, V'amar of Nachman, if you're going to explain that that's what Rav meant, that we're talking where he's damaging the property, but didn't Rav Nachman say, Amar Rabba bar Avua, that Rabba bar Avua said, Ein chazaka l'nizakin. You can't make a chazaka when it comes to damages. Isn't that saying that if you're damaging a property, that's not good for a chazaka? And the Gemara says, no, that's not what Rav Nachman meant at all. Ema ein din chazaka l'nizakin. What he meant was there's no halacha of chazaka, meaning if you're going to use a property by damaging the property, you don't make a chazaka after 3 years. You actually make a chazaka immediately. There's no din of cheskas gimel shanim. You make a chazaka immediately. Certainly a person should protest immediately if he sees someone damaging their property. So again, in this situation, if the husband is damaging the property, she really does have a responsibility to protest. And the Gemara continues, if you want, I could say another explanation for what Rav Nachman meant, and it has nothing to do with making a chazaka on property. La'avitmar Allah, wasn't it said on that statement of ein chazaka l'nizakin that Rav Mari Amar b'kutra, Rav Mari says we're talking about smoke. Rav Zvid Amar b'beis hakisei, Rav Zvid says we're talking about a bathroom. What it means to say is that we're talking about when neighbors are doing things that create foul smells, odors that reach their other neighbors. So there we say ein chazaka l'nizakin. The fact that I was acting this way as a neighbor for a long time doesn't mean I'm allowed to keep doing it. I don't establish a chazaka. If the neighbor who's being affected protests at any point in time, even much later, he can stop his neighbor from creating these bad odors. And so again, that would have nothing to do with the issue of establishing a chazaka in terms of ownership on a property. And the Gemara continues, Rav Yosef says, Liolam ba'acher. Actually, the case really is with a stranger, with the non-husband, meaning a regular, different person is trying to establish a chazaka, and Rav is saying that the wife is responsible to protest. And the question is, why is the wife responsible to protest? Rav himself said, you can't make a chazaka on the property of a married woman because the husband, she's expecting her husband to protest for her. And so Rav Yosef explains as follows, Ukagon, sha'achla mixas chazaka b'chai habal. What happened was, the person, while the husband was alive, some of the time, this stranger was already working the property while the husband was alive, but then v'shalosh la'achar misas habal, then he worked it for 3 years after the husband died. And so the question is, at that point in time, those 3 years, can he now establish a chazaka against the wife? At that point, Rav is saying, yes, once her husband dies, the wife is expected to protest, and if he works it 3 years after the husband died, then that would establish a chazaka. And why does that establish a chazaka? Because Miko di Bayamar, Anazavinta Minach, since he could claim, I bought it directly from you. He's sitting there 3 years. He can say, I bought it from you, from the wife. So Kiyamar Lonami At Zivinto Le, Bezavna Nihili. So when he also says you sold it to him, meaning you sold your rights to the property to your husband, and then he sold it to me, Mehemen, he's believed to say that as well, because once he's there 3 years, he has the ability to make these claims against her, and that's actually what Rav said. Rav said that after the husband dies, the married woman, the widow now, she has a responsibility to protest if somebody is on her property. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we said above. Amar Rav says, Ein machzikin b'nichsei eshes ish, a person cannot make a chazak on the property of a married woman, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph.